Welcome to VIOOH's 2024 State of the Nation UK event. Thank you for giving up some time this morning to come and listen to a little bit about our research in the UK this year. Great to see many familiar faces and some new faces as well. I know some of you have been to our events in the past. To those that haven't, thank you as well also for coming along today. For those that don't know me, I'm Gavin. I'm the Global Chief Customer and Revenue Officer at VIOOH. As I said, great to be here today to talk a little bit about the research. So this is actually the 5th year that we've done this research. We run the research in 5 main countries, so the UK, France, Germany, the US, Australia, and we've also this year run the research in a 6th guest market in Brazil. It's qualitative and quantitative research. We ask about 1,200 of the buy side, so mostly advertisers and agencies, their perspective on programmatic digital out of home, its evolution, how it's progressing, and obviously how it's intertwining more and more with other channels. So that's the quantitative part. The qualitative part is we also get key stakeholders across the industry to comment and add their thoughts and perspective on how they're seeing the industry evolve. And we're going to give you a little bit of a snapshot of some of that research today in a few formats, and hopefully, that gives you some interesting points to take away, think about, and discuss as well. For those that have been with us in years gone by, you'll notice we're at a different venue. Great venue. Thank you to the team that sourced it. It's frameless. Hopefully you saw how creative this venue is as you came down the escalators and the stairs. I think that kind of epitomizes how outdoor and programmatic outdoor is progressing. It's a hugely creative channel, hugely impactful, really visual, and I think, as I said, that is really indicative of the ecosystem, and hopefully this venue kind of encapsulates that as well. A couple of quick thank yous. Thank you to Open Agency for the design that they've done today. Really have utilised the venue well. Thank you also to 3Rock for this 3D creative behind us, which obviously we all know creative in this channel is becoming more and more impactful and important. Final point, we've just got 3 quite snappy sections to today. First of all, we're going to welcome Adam Orridge on stage. Adam is our Senior Insights and Measurement Manager. He works at VIOOH. He's going to give a few headlines about the research and a few key points. I'm going to come back on stage and host Shad Alter, who works at eToro. He's the head of programmatic and mobile. We'll have a fireside chat and talk about a few of the points that eToro are doing. And finally, Helen, our CMO, will come on stage and run a panel and have a little look at some of the key data from this year's reports. So about an hour, maybe slightly over. Chance for you to ask questions later as well, either via Slido on screen or pose to the panel at the end. So all that remains to be said, thank you for joining us again today. We really appreciate it. Hopefully you get a lot out of today. Sit back, relax, and I'd like to welcome Adam on stage. Thank you.
Hello everyone, how are we doing? My name's Adam, as Gavin said. I am the Senior Insights and Research Manager, and together with Helen, the CMO, for about the last 4 or 5 months, I've been working on the State of the Nation reports in all the markets that Gavin mentioned. In the next 15 minutes or so, what I'm really going to do is try and achieve 2 things. Number one, I'm going to talk about the research itself and how we run the research, and in particular, the group of respondents that we talk to for the quantitative, the survey part of the research itself. But also I'm going to run through some key insights from the UK State of the Nation report, which I hope will provide a little bit of context to the 2 discussions that Gavin and Helen are going to host afterwards. And I would encourage you, of course, to very much ask questions during the Q&A at the end, because that's, of course, how you'll get the most value out of this. There we go. So as Gavin mentioned, we run the research in 6 different markets this year. We've been running the research in the core markets for UK, France, Germany, the US and Australia for a number of years now. And this year we decided to include Brazil also because we thought it represented an interesting point of contrast, but also where there could potentially be great opportunity in the future. The research itself takes on the quantitative and qualitative parts that Gavin referenced, and the survey in particular covers a whole different range of themes that cover programmatic out of home. We talk about investment, we talk about adoption, DCO, sustainability, buying trends, for example. And I would obviously thoroughly encourage you to read all the UK report in particular from end to end. Each of these markets on screen have their own market highlights. And in addition, there is also a global report, which is this year 51 pages in length. And as you can imagine, it's quite detailed. And I would encourage you to read absolutely every single page of it all, by the way. And they're really meant to be read as companions. So if you read the UK report, for example, if you read the global report afterwards, a lot of the insights and ideas that you find in that market highlight report for the UK, you will find expanded upon and some additional context in the global report also. But also if you're thinking in multi-market terms for campaigns, for example, it might be particularly helpful for you. One quick point of housekeeping, as it were, with regards to the data itself. Some of the statistics that you will see on screen today will, for example, add up to more than 100% in terms of the numbers themselves on screen. And that's because in the survey, dependent upon the type of question that we're asking, sometimes respondents can select more than one answer. So if we were asking them, for example, about their preferences for measuring programmatic out of home, we might have given them, just by way of example, 6 responses that they could have chosen from. They might have selected just one response, but they could have selected response number 1 and 3 or 1, 3 and 5. And that's why things add up to more than 100% most of the time, to be honest with you. So something that's very important to understand about the State of the Nation research, and potentially one of the things that makes it very, very unique, is the definition, the sample definition, as we call it, of the people that respond to the survey, the 1,200 people that Gavin referenced in his opening. We use quite a precise definition, and the 2 key points on screen really are the joint or sole decision maker in the first line. And then if you look down the 3 bullet points afterwards, you'll see these joint or sole decision makers have effectively spent or placed buys against digital out of home or programmatic digital out of home in the last 12 months, the digital buyers, or have spent budgets against other programmatic channels. And the point of this is really twofold. Number one, these people are making decisions about programmatic out of home, pure and simple. And it's really those people, the people that have the power to shift budgets, to change trends, that we're really, really interested in speaking to. But also those people have been doing it recently. They've been doing it in the last 12 months, which is really what part of the research covers in many respects. So, another important point on the group of people who have responded to this survey is really the pie chart on the left here, that if you look at the large 76 percentage points, that 76% are of an executive director level, with 10% being of at least board director level. So those people really are, and I suspect there are a number of people in the room today who probably fit this criteria, but those people really are making choices about the path of their business when it comes to programmatic out of home, but also potentially have the opportunity to shift the trend, as it were, in future when it comes to programmatic out of home also. The other thing that I want to say before we have a quick look at the statistics, State of the Nation is really great for 2 reasons, and all great research, in my opinion, has 2 parts to it. One part of that is the behavioural part, in the sense that we ask questions of the audience, which are something like, what have you been doing in the last 12 months? How have you been placing your budget? How have you been moving your budget around? What's been motivating that budget movement? What have you been doing in terms of sustainability and DCO, for example? Those are really behaviours from the last 12 months. And in contrast to that, we also ask people about their attitudes, with the idea of potentially getting a view on what could happen in the next 12 months. What do they see as barriers to adoption, for example? And when you combine this very simple idea of understanding both behaviour and attitude, it's really at the crossroads of a behaviour and attitude that you will find the highest quality insight. But at the same time, you will each have your own experiences that you can bring from your own individual businesses. And I would encourage you to think critically about the information that you see on screen. But that is really where you might find potential opportunity for yourselves in future if you think about some of the information we're going to share today with that mindset going forward. So I'm just quickly going to whip through a few kind of key statistics from the report, knowing that Gavin and Helen are about to unpack these potentially in quite some detail in their following conversations. So UK advertisers have strongly embraced programmatic out of home, with 29% of campaigns utilising the technology in the past 18 months. That puts us slightly above the global average in other markets. And that adoption rate is to grow to 36% in the next 18 months. And that puts us again fractionally above the global average. UK marketers are also forecasting a 29% increase in investment in the same time period, which again puts us fractionally above that global average. 26% of agencies, rather than the advertisers, are primarily driving the creation of new dedicated programmatic out-of-home budgets. The role of the DSP has grown substantially, and it was the largest year-on-year growth versus last year in terms of responsibility. And that was a 30 percentage point growth, by the way. And the role of the out-of-home specialist also grew 27%. And I know this is something Helen's going to unpack in quite some detail during the panel also. When it comes to how digital out-of-home is bought, campaigns through programmatic buys only rose 18% year on year versus 2023. But the idea of buying direct only, or a mix of direct and programmatic, also both performed strongly. And I think the idea of why you might select one, or a mix or a direct strategy, is definitely worth some discussion, hopefully later on also. There is a preference, I would say, for guaranteed deals in the UK, although that is slightly below the global average. But then when it comes to non-guaranteed deals, that puts us slightly above the global average in the UK. My favourite topic of all, when it comes to measuring programmatic out-of-home campaigns, I'm really pleased to see that the top three choices were all really performance-based rather than brand-based, which I think is a very important trend when we consider the idea that out-of-home might have traditionally been considered kind of an upper funnel brand awareness type play. When it comes to multi-channel activation, programmatic out-of-home for performance-led campaigns and brand-led campaigns is most often paired with social media and display. 90% of marketers are of the belief that programmatic out-of-home offers the most innovative opportunities when it comes to all media channels. And I believe social media and display in that order. That's in the report, by the way. There's a chart with 10 or 12 different media channels. And programmatic out of home came in the top there with social media and display. It's a very interesting one. 96% of respondents were considering piloting or actively integrating DCO into their campaigns, yet the actual adoption of DCO only stands at 8%. So it's a very important question to understand why the difference between the two numbers. What are the barriers there? And when we asked that question, funnily enough, the three top responses, the three top barriers to DCO that we saw were training on the possibilities, the budgetary constraints of implementing DCO, and the limited access to the data required to implement the campaigns effectively. So that's more or less all I'm going to say, and I'm going to hand over to Gavin and Chad for our fireside chat.
Thank you, Adam. Chad, would you like to join me?
Thank you.
Great to have you here today. Thank you. Thanks for agreeing to be interrogated by me on stage for 10, 15 minutes. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Maybe, some great statistics there. Really interesting. Please do download the report. Some really good year-on-year progress and some really interesting talking points that we'll try and tackle now, and also Helen will try and tackle on the panel later. Shad, maybe just to start, could you just introduce yourself, your role, who you work for, just so that the audience gets to know a bit about you first, please?
Sure, of course. For those of you who don't know eToro, we are the world's largest social investment platform. We have 35 million registered users from around the world, over 6,000 tradable assets. And basically our goal is to democratize finance, to open up the financial markets to everyone. I've been at eToro for about 8 years now, and I'm currently the head of advertising, programmatic advertising strategy.
Fantastic, thank you. So first question, what as a business are you trying to get out of your digital and maybe digital out-of-home strategy? What's the kind of premise, what's the logic, what are you trying to achieve?
Right, so definitely there's a huge brand awareness component, as most of our campaigns are, because we feel that without having a strong and trustworthy brand, user acquisition won't succeed. But we also pride ourselves of having a very diverse marketing mix, especially online. We're pretty much everywhere we need to be. But as we move to offline, we notice a lot of blind spots, especially in countries where we have a strong offline presence, such as the UK. We needed to somehow bridge the gaps between the two worlds as people move from online to offline. So we thought that digital out of home would be a great format to do this.
Fantastic, thanks. And I know you want to sort of showcase just a little bit about a programmatic campaign, just so everyone can get a feel of kind of what you just alluded to there. I know you've done some great work with Yahoo, I think, in the past. Maybe you could just bring that to life for the audience, just so they get a feel for what you've done, please.
Sure. So eToro, we ran a very big Olympics campaign around Europe and especially in Paris, of course. And we knew that people would be just bombarded with ads everywhere. So we had this idea of targeting not just Olympic fans, but also sports fans in general. And what we did was we set up, with the help of the team at Yahoo, digital out-of-home campaign at the fan zone in King's Cross. So they were targeting sports fans in general, people that came to watch the game, have a good time. But then we also put another digital out-of-home screen at the train station in Paris. So we're actually also targeting the commuters who were going to actually watch the games. These were the Olympic, kind of the Olympic fans. And we tried to get the idea that we would be first in mind. So people would see us in the London station, at the Paris station, and then further on into the games.
Fantastic, yeah. Really, really nice way of kind of using an event and obviously trying to get the brand profile kind of raised as well. I've been in the industry for about 5 years, and measurement is becoming obviously more important, rightly so. Brands, marketers expect to be able to measure, see what that return on investment is, or whatever KPIs they set and objectives. Can you talk a bit more about the measurement, either for that campaign or other campaigns? Like, what are you trying to achieve? How do you gauge success? What to you almost quantifies brilliance from that outdoor campaign?
So I think for this campaign specifically, there were a few elements of success for us. The first was the actual campaign setup. We're using Verizon DSP. The platform is really intuitive. The whole setup was just a breeze, and that was a win in and of itself. Regarding the measurement, and obviously we can sit here and talk and a whole panel about measurement, but for this campaign specifically, we had two ways of trying to view what success is. And the first was running an incremental measurement. So we have an incremental platform that we use, and we ran measurements 2 weeks after the campaign was, 2 weeks before the campaign and 2 weeks after the campaign. And we noticed that there was an 11% in conversions, meaning 11% of conversions would not have happened if the users weren't exposed to this campaign. So that was a success for us. Second of all, which I think is a success also for the actual format, is that it's possible to create a retargeting list of the users that were exposed to the campaign. And then you obviously target them later on online with more performance-based banners. And we can see there, when we targeted them online, there was a massive increase in CTR. So meaning this campaign actually, we were exposed to the people that we wanted to be exposed to, and we could actually target them again online.
Okay, great. Really good statistics, and thanks for sharing them today. Adam mentioned an interesting stat earlier. I was quite surprised with that, actually. It was about almost the ownership of planning and who's responsible for that. And it does get quite an interesting kind of murmur from the audience every time we present that stat. This year it was very focused on DSPs and a managed service, but also agencies being responsible for planning programmatic. You've in-housed everything, I'm right in thinking. Maybe you could just explain, why did you make that decision? When was that decision made? Maybe are you seeing benefit to that? One presumes yes, but just talk through perhaps what that rationale was for the audience, please.
Okay, so obviously I have nothing against agencies. I've worked with agencies before. They're an integral part of the ecosystem. We at eToro, we work in a very scrutinized vertical. The financial vertical is highly regulated. There's lots of compliance, lots of legal issues, and we can't afford any mess ups in our messages or images that get out. So we have an internal system that gets approved. And this is what we had to do from the get-go, just to minimize the risk of having any compliance issues. But I think generally as a company, we also like to empower our teams. And getting our campaign managers, and I have one here, Max, in the audience, he was actually running the campaign. Getting them involved, getting their hands dirty, bringing their own ideas into the mix, it's really empowering, and it's a great thing that every company should do.
Yeah, I think it's great that some brands do in-house. Obviously, great agency roles as well. And I think, as you said, the team get to see firsthand how to run and operate and learn as well. It's all about learning, isn't it? And how you perhaps intertwine channels, run campaigns alongside each other, and really develop that strategy subject to what the aims and goals are. There was another interesting data point from the UK research. It was actually around data. Sometimes people sort of talk about this channel being slightly, I wouldn't say data poor, but getting better in terms of data and data usage, and obviously what data can and can't be utilized in the planning of programmatic outdoor. The statistic from the report was that 66% of UK advertisers acknowledge the importance of using data when planning. That makes sense. Obviously, the more data, the richer the kind of the logic and the strategy. And that was against 59% globally. So obviously, UK marketeers are wanting to incorporate more data, first and third party, of course. How do you use data in your digital out-of-home planning? Do you use data, I guess, is the obvious question. How do you use it? Are you finding it's more and more important for what you're doing? It'd be great to get a bit of an opinion on that, please.
Sure. So we're very conscious about the whole third-party data, cookies, etc. At some point, when Google decides they're going away, they'll go away. So we've, for a few months already, even a few years, have kind of relied less on third-party cookie data, both in our targeting and our buying. We are very first-party data rich, as most companies will be. So we use our first-party data to kind of model what our ideal user is, who they are, what they do, etc. But more importantly, and it's kind of shifting more in this way now, is that we're using location data. So not just understanding who our ideal user is, but where they will be. So having this idea of using location data, and it fits brilliantly with digital out of home, because we can now say, okay, we have this person, they are rugby fans, for example. There's a game at Twickenham. We can put out a campaign at the stations. So using our first-party data, creating our models, and then using location data with digital out of home to target our audience much better.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Great use of data, and continued use of data, I think, is paramount to the channel's success. I mean, I talk a lot to people about that omni-channel planning. I think if you're a buyer or a planner, you expect more data to be at your fingertips to be able to plan and optimize, and rightly so. And I think the more that data can be used and analyzed, the greater the channel has to potential to grow, without a doubt. There's a hot topic at the moment of sustainability. And rightly so. Lots of scrutiny on all channels, all media channels, sustainability, environmental factors, things like that. There was 59% of UK advertisers that responded said that sustainability was in their top 5 kind of topics in terms of when they're looking to plan and buy media. Is that a factor? How do they consider that? I know your thoughts now are your own thoughts rather than eToro's thoughts, but would love your opinion on how do you think sustainability is and should be kind of thought about in terms of that planning, that omni-mix? Do you think about that individually when you're looking at that kind of growth strategy? How important is it, do you think?
Well, I think personally, I don't think about it as much as I should. I think as the industry itself, programmatic marketers don't see the actual benefits or the detriment to the environment, maybe because they think it's either out of their control or they're just unaware. But just the tech itself, I mean, RTB, the bidding, the auctions, it's a lot of computing power. So there's obviously has a big carbon footprint. And I think there are ways where we can try at least to minimize this effect. And some examples could be looking at your supply chain, trying to minimize it, buying less on the open web, more private marketplaces and direct deals, etc. Thinking about budgets and making sure you're buying the right impressions, because every impression that's not needed is a waste. It's the waste of computing power. So there are things that we can do, and there are things that we should be thinking about. And I just hope that companies start actually realizing this and taking it as part of their kind of policy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think I was in Brazil a few weeks ago presenting, and the data points there sort of showing that about 80% of consumers there are actually expecting marketeers to think about sustainability, and yet only 1/3 were actually considering it. And there's some great statistics in the UK data as well that kind of almost reiterate that. So please do have a look. Innovation in programmatic out of home is really developing, I think. And again, the channel is still quite nascent compared to other channels, growing at a rapid rate. But innovation almost every year seems to be, new, whether it be sort of around creative optimization or just data points, et cetera, et cetera. What's the most exciting thing you're seeing, or maybe even what would you like to see more of perhaps in this channel to help it continue to evolve?
Yeah, so as you said, it's definitely in its infancy stage, but being a part of the development and progress, it's always a great thing and a huge learning curve. I'm very excited about, as I said, the location data. I'm very excited about what we can do on the creative side. I've seen some ideas that actually is not an idea anymore. Actually, I heard that there is possible, I think one of the ride-sharing apps or Zipcar, that once a car is parked, on the windows, they would show kind of a screen and you could actually target that placement again of the car. So going back just to the location data, what we can do more with creatives and the measurements, it's all part of the progress and just being part of the general progress of the tech.
Yeah, there's so much creativity going on. It's great. And I think it needs to be. You know, we're here talking about the sort of share of ad spend that programmatic and digital out-of-home has versus the wider media ecosystem. If we're going to capitalize on more of that ad spend, I think that innovation and that creative way of gaining budget, targeting key audiences is really critical, certainly to grow that size of the pie. Final question before we get the panel up on stage. Obviously, you've been at eToro, as you say, for sort of 7 or 8 years. You've been working in the programmatic space. Any advice you'd give to brands or to kind of, people looking to either invest for the first time or continue to invest? What sort of thoughts would you recommend they go through or thinking in terms of process? And what did you do perhaps to kind of really justify this channel as a mainstay on your plan?
So I definitely think now is the time to at least test. But you need to look at it not with the lens of the legacy measurement that you did for your past campaigns. A digital out-of-home campaign cannot be seen alone. It needs to be part of the kind of omni-channel strategy. But more importantly, it's the education. You need to bring in your finance teams, your C-levels, educate them about this format, let them understand what this can achieve for the company, because if you don't, and you look at the campaign as a normal campaign, it won't be a success. But if you think about how it can influence your main conversion channels and do the uplift tests, it's a no-brainer. So I would say definitely do it. If you're thinking about it, if you're on the sidelines, do it. Now's the time. Be a part of the development and just educate yourselves and your teams.
I love that. Influence the conversion channels. I think that's a great point. And, educating C-level, educating the whole business, I guess, at the end of the day, because, there's great knowledge hubs in companies, but equally so there's areas that we can all improve to continue that education, that learning, and that starts at C-level. I completely agree, and I get it embedded at the top. So thank you, Shad. Really appreciate your comments and thoughts today. A quick round of applause, please, for Shad.
Thank you.
We're just going to go on to the third and final part of today. Please do keep the questions coming on the Slido kind of QR code that you've seen on screen. I'm going to introduce Helen first, who's our CMO. Helen's going to invite a group of panelists on stage just to talk in a bit more detail about some of those data points that we've shared today. So over to you, Helen. Thank you.
Would my panelists like to come up? It's okay. I think we can work out which one is Alice. Okay, so yes, thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Really appreciate your time today. We've got all the mics. Okay, and yes, a warm welcome. So let's just kick off. As Gavin mentioned, we are taking questions on Slido, which we'll answer at the end of this session. I know there is one on there already, so be prepared. But maybe you can just start off by introducing yourself. We'll go this way, Alice.
Oh, hi, I'm Alice Beecroft. I work at Yahoo. I run our international global strategy and partnerships team, focusing across our DSP.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mark Halliday. I'm the Director of Programmatic at JCDecaux. JCDecaux, largest out-of-home company in the world. I've been with the company for about 9 weeks, but previously I've been in programmatic roles in agencies, having worked actually on the Media Group for about 14 years.
I'm Andrew, nice to meet you, Programmatic Innovation Director for Omnicom, working on Team X and feeling very vulnerable about the massive pictures of us on the walls.
Thank you. But yes, obviously, if you forget who everybody is, the pictures are up on the sides here. So let's kick off. This year's report showed that in the UK, programmatic digital out-of-home buys have significantly increased, and that's an 18 percentage point increase year on year. So maybe we can start, Mark, with you. What do you think is fueling this growth, and why might clients adopt a programmatic only or a hybrid or a direct strategy for their digital out-of-home?
Sure. Well, we are definitely seeing a huge amount of growth in programmatic digital out-of-home. I think our brand count for this year is nudging the 400 brand mark. And there's just been so much progression in the whole industry. There's a huge amount of momentum going behind programmatic digital out-of-home. And if you look at all of the different stages of it, from sort of insights, at DOOH, we're constantly putting out a load of research. You guys are putting out a load of research today, sort of showing the advantages of attention metrics, of the multiplication or the multiplier effect of out-of-home. From a planning perspective, that we've got more data going into the way that we're planning audiences and planning campaigns than ever before. From an activation point of view, the DSPs are doing fantastic work be it an on-the-channel DSP or a point solution DSP. And then there's just more robust approaches to measurement. So there's lots of different areas of growth across a whole sort of spanning the whole area of campaign planning and activation. So, and then the fact that programmatic essentially democratizes out-of-home, allows smaller brands or smaller agencies to get involved, and programmatic is a brilliant way of activating either at local level or sort of tactically around events. So there's a plethora of reasons why it's growing, and it's just very exciting that it's been opened up to so many different advertisers and agencies.
Thank you. Andrew, you're obviously working directly with clients. What are their thoughts or your thoughts around the strategy for choosing one methodology? Or another?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, first of all, good. Programmatic out of home should be growing massively quickly. It comes back to the amount of impact that the channel adds. I mean, from a programmatic perspective, you just can't rival what out of home can deliver. An MPU doesn't quite provide the same level of impact. There is a huge amount of client interest in it. We're probably not quite at the stat that was mentioned before. There you go. But it's a huge growth point for us. We've seen it grow hugely year on year. In fact, all omni-channel strategies are a huge growth point for Omnicom, of which programmatic out of home is a focus on. So I mean, I'm hopeful and confident that we'll be able to deliver growth there and value for the clients.
Fabulous, thank you. Now, Alice, I'm going to start with you on the next one. There was a large increase in the usage of DSPs to plan and buy programmatic digital out-of-home. Probably no surprise. I think that goes along with, technically you need it from the programmatic side. But what challenges or opportunities are you seeing for DSPs in this space as you continue to play a larger role?
Well, firstly, what a fantastic stat. Obviously, next year, I would love to see it at sort of 70%. Instead, but really, really great to see that people are leaning in to programmatic home and, as you quite rightly say, sort of activating it through the DSPs. I think the bit that I would be interested to understand would be, and I don't know if Adam has this, is to actually break it out between the specialist point solution DSPs and the omni-channel DSPs, because we are seeing, obviously Yahoo, we're an omni-channel DSP, we work across all of the different channels. And we are still seeing that there's a huge amount of education that's still needed, especially where the budgets are coming out of the digital teams. Where the budgets are coming out of the specialist teams, which do still exist in a lot of the agencies, we are finding that for the most part, they're focusing on the specialist DSPs and the point solutions. So we started that journey probably about sort of 3-4 years ago when the impression multiplier really did sort of come into its own and become like the standard currency. But there's definitely a need to continue to be banging that drum around the sort of the knowledge and the understanding as to the advantages within the digital teams. The other bit that I think we haven't yet almost like transcended from is the over-reliance of using preferred deals. and the over-reliance of everything being activated through PMPs. And I think one of the challenges there is when you're actually looking at everything from a custom PMP position, you still actually have to handhold people. You have to help them through that process. So we're seeing a great increase coming out of those that have in-house. So for example, eToro is doing a lot with, as you saw earlier, a lot within out of home. Equally, the independent agencies are doing an awful lot, mainly because for the most part, their teams are across all channels versus having those sort of specialist teams focusing on individual channels. And I'm just sort of coming just back to the whole sort of PMP pace. Open Exchange is available for digital out of home. It is viable. It's something that's built into a lot of the DSPs. But what we're not seeing is we're not seeing much uptake of that. And I think if we can sort of transcend that over-reliance of sort of PMPs and preferred deals and sort of open it up, I think we'll actually see that 30% become a lot higher.
Okay, thank you. Mark or Andrew, anything to add on this?
Yeah, I think there's programmatic digital out of home is still relatively nascent. There are some people who have got loads and loads of experience with it, but because there are, out of home has always sat in an odd area where we've had real out of home specialists, and now we've got sort of programmatic teams are looking to layer out of home into a multi-channel strategy. So with that, there's just a lot more hands-on support, which is coming through media owners like ourselves, through the DSPs. There's some of the DSPs as well, especially the omnichannel ones, where they're seeing real differentiation in digital out of home. And with that, they are maybe taking on a bit more of the planning responsibility or really sort of hand-holding advertisers through it. And the way that we are often creating deals, we can, at the media owner side, can control a lot of the different variables and elements that go into it, the time of data, locations, the data that's applied. So the more bespoke we're making the deals, the more sort of, the closer relationship we are having with the DSPs and the end advertiser. But it's all an education game, and ultimately we'll get to a point where I think the advertisers and the agencies will have much more confidence, will be more reliant, and as the DSPs get more and more sophisticated, there'll just be this more confidence to be able to deliver things within one team.
Can I slightly disagree with something
Sure.
you've just
Please
said?
do.
Sorry.
Alice loves a spicy panel.
And this definitely hasn't been engineered. But no, you just mentioned about the fact that you can bundle everything together and sort of do the time of day and provide all the audience data, et cetera. But isn't the whole point of programmatic to actually have everything held within the DSP and allow that the client to be able to layer that functionality on top of the supply versus having to have everything on a custom basis?
I can comment on that if you're happy.
Yep.
If you're
Sure.
happy for me to. I think you both identified a skills gap, right?
Yeah.
Between, I mean, with programmatic out of home, you're either asking an out of home specialist to understand the intricacies of the programmatic space, or a programmatic specialist to ask to understand the intricacies in the planning of the out-of-home space. So with a rise in proprietary tech from vendors, creating their own DSPs, you will see some of that sort of hand-holding. And every programmatic boy in my body wants to say, absolutely, Alice, we should be omni-channel in everything that we're buying across every touch point, but you cannot expect that from an out-of-home specialist working in a place like Talon.
No, agreed.
To be able to cater for it. So hand-holding is maybe a bit mean for some of my colleagues, but it's a completely valid point that I think is the result of what is quite a evidenceable skills gap.
And there are different approaches to the way that you go around planning out of home. So some agencies, some advertisers are looking at doing a lot of the planning in systems which sit outside of the DSP. Some are doing it within the DSP, and some of the DSPs are maybe not as sophisticated. So when it comes to that, if there are DSPs which do not have the planning capabilities and the data inputs which go into it, then often that's where we can intervene and do a lot of that curation, where we can build out very bespoke deal IDs, which include curation using RDMP, which are looking at setting time restrictions or identifying the specific frames. So it's really, I guess, it's just a lot of flexibility. In an ideal world, I guess everything would sit within a DSP and you'd have that total control. But yeah, we're not always there for all advertisers at this point.
Okay, thank you. I think one of the things that I would just say that was in the report, we don't have it on the slides, but again, another reason to read the report is, which Alice touched on actually, was that when you look at where the budgets are coming from, that if you're only talking to the out-of-home teams, that is predominantly where the budget is coming from. But when you start talking to the digital teams, to Andrew's point about this overlap and this sort of new world, that's really where we're seeing investment. And then on top of that, once you are an adopter and you started your programmatic digital out-of-home journey, you're actually more like, you will increase that budget in the future. So we are seeing investment, being driven by existing adopters and also through that convergence with the digital, with the omni-channel world as well. Thank you. Okay, so when we look at this audience centricity and data, when we looked for programmatic digital out-of-home, and Gavin touched on it earlier, UK advertisers are seeking audience data, more audience data. They were actually, that became a factor in 42%. Mark, what do you see this having an effect, or how do you see this having an effect on media owners in terms of the data that you can provide?
Yeah, I think that programmatic has always been around audience. I think out of home is inherently around audience as well. We know where all of our panels are. We know the points of interest around them. And we have a better understanding now of mobility patterns and how audiences move around our panels throughout the day. And over the last few years, the integration of data partnerships and just data full stop into our platforms, or the way that we're planning, has got more and more sophisticated. So we have a DMP. Within our DMP, we have integrations with multiple different data owners, and we're able to fuse those data sets together as well. So we're working with our landlord data, so that includes Transport for London, where we have some of the demographic data from Oyster cards and tap-in data on buses. One of our landlords is Tesco, and we're working with dunnhumby data to look at how we can identify people based on their buying behaviours. We work with YouGov, with BT, with Captify to look at search data. So there's never been more data really going into the way that we're understanding audiences and how we're able to target audiences based on that as well. So yeah, and the way that we're sort of thinking about audience as well to inspire the way that agencies and advertisers can think about how fluid and how precise you can be with out-of-home as well. So when the football season came back, we built out an auction pack, which was all around trying to reach passionate football fans. And the flexibility you have with programmatic out-of-home is you can look at targeting every top-flight stadium in the UK in the 2 hours before kickoff. You would turn it off during kickoff when all the fans are engaged in the stadium, and then on the way out again, you can target them. And we can understand the way that people travel to and from the stadia. We can look at having dynamic creative post the actual result of the match. You can sort of hero the result or the players who might have contributed. So, and that's really just being used as a thought starter, really. We're building packages around Black Friday, around Halloween, around Christmas. So yeah, we're sort of thinking about audiences, packaging that up, saying there's an off-the-shelf solution if you want it, but we're sort of using audience for agencies and advertisers to understand how flexible programmatic can be, and then also looking at how we can sort of use that to create bespoke audiences based on their brief.
Thank you. Now, Andrew, obviously in the digital world, audience-led buying is very prevalent. From your perspective, from the agency side, what are you seeing? What are the benefits that you're talking about with your clients, and how do they use their data?
Sure. So I would say inherently audience is a part of all programmatic discussions, but I would actually say programmatic out of home was all about location. And the reason I would say that is because you can do all your segmentation work and all of your work on specific audiences, but it always comes back to the highest index of those audiences in the physical world, right? So as long as we remain using out of home as a broadcast channel, it's important that we get the balance right between looking for specific audiences and good locations. I mean, I think there's value in peripheral audiences, or some programmatic colleagues might refer to it as wastage. It's not a display channel. You will not eliminate incorrect audiences. So treating it as such and playing to its strengths as super high impact targeted awareness is what I would advise. However, what I think Mark says, and the sales point for programmatic is not to eliminate the users that we don't consider valuable, but to make targeting, I guess, more accountable. Like I say, it comes back to that index rather than the process of elimination. But you might disagree.
It's a big difference between traditional digital advertising, which is got that aim of that one-to-one approach, when out of home is one to many, and we can use a load of data to be as precise as we can and still look at the measurement around it. But I personally see that as an advantage.
Yeah. I think it's a shame to take a channel like programmatic out of home and try to make it do something else. We've got display for that, bluntly. So play to the strengths would be my advice to markets and to colleagues.
Thank you. Alice, I know you've got some strong thoughts on addressability and this audience topic.
Yeah, I think I'd probably prefer the word audience-centric than addressability when thinking about programmatic out of home, only simply because I completely agree with you, Andrew, it's about indexing, and also, Mark, what you said, it's not a one-to-one, it is a one-to-many. But I get very excited about data and how data can actually be used, and certainly the connectivity that you can actually put between the different channels when you're actually harnessing movement data, and the insights that you can actually see about the screen in order to be able to sort of index what it is that they sort of, index highly towards is, absolutely fantastic. I mean, at Yahoo, our focus is very much on the fact that we are a publisher as well. We have over 11 million consented, and these are current, by the way, not from the 1990s, 11 million consented logged in users. In the UK alone, and being able to take that data and combine that with the movement data that we license to then also see, again, similar to what Captify, that you're doing with Captify, what are people searching for? How do those screens actually index towards that? Equally, what are their interests with regards to the content they're exploring, over the internet? What is it that they're buying that's coming through from, the Yahoo purchase data? So really being able to provide the clients and agencies that we work with much greater, deeper insights about those individual screens that we're bringing through from our first-party data that we have, and it's working brilliantly. It also lends itself that ability to be able to connect across into other channels to actually prove like the worth of programmatic digital out of home. You heard Shad speak earlier about the fact that by running out of home and combining that with other channels, they did actually see an incremental uplift. So, there is lots and lots of proof points out there that taking like a data or audience-centric approach really does work. So yeah, no, I'm all for it.
And particularly for that omni-channel play, that strategy.
Yeah. Definitely, and I think that's what you lose if you are. We spoke earlier about the fact that programmatic out of home is seeing like a 30% increase, but is that coming from the specialist DSPs or is that coming from the omni-channel? And I would really, really sort of push clients and agencies to focus on that omni-channel approach, because you get the efficiencies of programmatic, but you're also able to do it in a multi-channel approach, and that's where the data piece comes in.
Great, thank you. So Gavin touched on this, as did Adam. DCO, very hot topic. Massive interest, but low adoption. So what do you think, Andrew, is driving the interest that is 96%, and then perhaps what's stopping it?
I mean, maybe to be too blunt about it, DC was really hard. Like, to do properly, it's really, really intense.
But it looks great.
It's fabulous, isn't it? But it's hard to do. And I think it comes back to, it's almost easier in display when you've got those widely accessible external or any third-party, first-party, whatever data signals to make creative decisioning on. With out of home, the easiest route to activate DCO is the bigger factors. So it comes back to location, weather. I mean, I always talk about a Benadryl example, which is really nice when they were able to forecast the pollen count for the following day to promote anti-allergy medication, which I think is an outstanding use of DCO. I think another easy one for clients that have bricks and mortar presence on the high street is location. That's a fairly easy to implement DCO, but the points that were raised in the presentation earlier come back to a knowledge of what data points are available and cost. I think what's missing from there is time investment and a knowledge and a learning investment in it too, which is something to consider. For a lot of clients, it might not be commercially sensible to spend 6 months of full-time work cracking a DCO strategy. Clearly the interest is hard to convert, right? You've got 96% of people into it with only 8% of clients doing it. So that gap will close as it becomes easier and as it becomes more mature.
Any concern that, out of home obviously has a plethora of different sizes? I mean, it's not like the cookie cutter, more standard approach that we have in other channels. Is that a concern, or
I think so.
Just something to be overcome?
I think you're probably touching on a bit of a concern that some clients have around general media quality. And it is a valid concern. I mean, if you were to go to 3, maybe even 4 years ago, what you had was a lot of partner vendors selling the unsold stuff through programmatic channels. And so there is a little bit of work to do with clients and breaking down that barrier and saying, actually, no one's buying Piccadilly lights on the trade desk, right? But for it to be viewed as remnant inventory is, I think, something the agencies probably need to course correct slightly. But I think that is a bigger point. I mean, it applies to all programmatic channels, doesn't it?
The remnant ghost of digital display when programmatic started there. Alice?
Just to quickly jump in, I think what a missed opportunity though, right? We've got only 8% of people are utilising DCO. We do so much work in the media planning, working with the DSPs, to squeeze every bit of juice we can out of the data for the implementation. And then for only 8% of people to use this incredible creative canvas and not use it dynamically, it's just a massive missed opportunity. And I think there's a slight change in perception at the moment in terms of what advertisers can do with their first-party data and the stories that can be told with first-party data. So I was talking to some of your colleagues on the Comedia Group the other day, and they were saying, that they have a sportswear brand, and they're looking at how they can use point-of-sale digital 6 sheets, and rather than sort of thinking about first-party data as email addresses, they're looking at the data which comes out of the website. So looking at how they can take trending products from the website and pull that into the out-of-home ads in proximity to a retailer, then link that up to stock levels. So if a particular trainer is out of stock, they bring in another one. Mm-hmm. And then if it's raining, they change all of the copy and show waterproof shoes instead. So there's all of this great stuff, like Specsavers have used their appointment feed data where they can say, tomorrow in our store we have 7 appointments for eye tests. And that then led to 1,000 extra appointments per store. And the lifetime value of that goes into millions, because you get people in for an eye test and they get comfortable with that optician. They buy all of their glasses there over years and years and years. So using that real-time data, not just email addresses, but just telling stories out of the data, and it's incredible. And from the data that we have, it shows that brands who do use dynamic elements to their creative have a 40+% uplift in brand metrics. Yeah. So it should be a massive focus. And at the moment, it's sort of right at the end of the journey of
Can I ask you a kind of follow-up question on that? I hope that's okay. This is obviously, as a programmatic specialist, this is our bread and butter. In your experience, are out-of-home specialists as able to have conversations or as
on creative?
Or on data inputs generally? Is it just as easy to engage an out-of-home specialist the way it would be a programmatic one?
almost all of the out-of-home specialists will have a specialist production team there as well.
Okay.
So, and
We have a specialist production team
Yeah,
here
yeah.
as well that do dynamic creative for out of home. So that it's there's appetite there.
Yeah.
But I did quite like seeing the 3 stats that were up there, because it is right. It's firstly, there's a skills gap.
Yeah.
But there's a skills gap, I think, from an understanding with regards to the team or the client that you're actually engaging with. There's definitely a time piece, because programmatic is all about doing things quickly, not about taking sort of a long period of time. The data is definitely out there, but our biggest challenge is actually the pipes. And I know we've separately talked about this, Mark, but actually understanding which screens are actually able to take DCO.
Yeah.
There is actually a technical constraint there. They have to be enabled to take HTML5, and ensuring that there is, at the moment coming through in the bid stream, there's no flag that says whether or not it's capable or
That's
not.
interesting, yeah.
So I think there's potentially a little bit of low-hanging fruit there on the standardization, the technical side, which would actually help to elevate it. But Mark, to your point, the fact that the stats said, was it 91% are interested in it?
96% interest, 8% adoption.
You're right, it's criminal, completely criminal,
it's criminal.
because the proof points do show. But maybe it's a case whereby we're going to have to just keep increasing the number of case studies and the proof points, as with anything that we do.
Yeah, and my team can attest to the fact that even when it's static images, it will come through at the very, very, very last minute as well.
Yeah.
So we have far too many emails or creative copy sent through at 5:31 on a Friday. So yeah,
Good to know you're still there at 5:31
Well, yeah,
on a
absolutely,
Friday.
yeah, not on the golf course yet. But so yeah, it's I think just a lot of consideration should go into. We put so much energy into data planning for media. Let's do it for creative as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing that, because I just had to refresh my Wi-Fi. So thank you for talking while I was doing that. And I know you had touched on the technical side of things.
Yeah.
So I think there's obviously still challenges that as an industry we need to work together to resolve. But in terms of sort of the next 12 months, looking forward a little bit, what do you think is going to be the most significant trend? And I'll start with you, Alice.
I'm going to say measurement. I've also said measurement in similar conversations around the TV space as well. But I think measurement has to be it, because at the end of the day, the reason why clients are placing their budgets in this channel is because they want to see that it's effective and that it has sort of proven results. And that's the only way we're going to see that sort of increase. So sort of going above and beyond brand effectiveness, going above and beyond that panel-based approach of measuring, actually being able to bring sort of tangible results in that showcase not only does it drive brand effectiveness, it's also increasing search, or it's actually, mic's still working, it's increasing sort of user engagement along other channels. I think measurement and sort of multi-channel measurement and the impact of out of home, that for me, I would like to see almost become just the norm.
Yeah.
Whereas right now, I think it's seen as being something
Extra.
yeah. Something shiny. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Similar, I just wish someone would put cookies out of their misery, because it's just, there's been...
Make a decision, one way or the other.
But just with all of the rhetoric, and like I said earlier, ex-agency side as well, we've been talking to advertisers around the sunsetting of cookies for a long time, and so much focus has been around how do we target audiences, and there's not been nearly enough energy going into how you look at an evolved measurement approach. We've probably arguably been over-investing into digital for a few years, because it is so accountable, that it's so real time, you can track everything back to a CPA. In a cookieless world, it's going to be a bit more difficult to look at CPA, so more and more brands need to be looking at holistic forms of measurement, whether that's going to be looking at agile versions of MMM, or looking at fusing different data sets around footfall measurement, around real-time sales data, real-time brand uplift. So I think that we've done a lot of research to show that when out of home is layered into an omnichannel digital strategy, because of the effect of out of home, where it's a very, very trusted channel, where it has an impact on priming audiences. So they just have this sort of, they just sort of feel that the campaign is around them. So when they then see activity on other channels, they're more likely to engage with it. So this sort of multiplier effect that you have with out of home, where you see the ad everywhere, and then when you hear an ad on the radio or via a connected device, when you're seeing an ad on social, out of home is proven to have sort of give those other channels a running start. And we can show a lot of that data to clients, but I think a lot of clients need to experience that for themselves. So I think as digital becomes, so the programmatic digital out of home is layered more into on-the-channel digital strategies, we'll see more brands understanding that multiplier effect. So I think that will be probably the big trend, is sort of taking away from the conceptual growth that you get from out of home and actually seeing it for themselves.
Thanks. And Andrew,
Yeah,
that multi-channel MMM?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. Something that's interesting for me as a paid specialist, I think you highlighted, is some of the impact that programmatic or actually any form of out of home has on organic channels. Trends like, does PPC become more effective because you've got a massive out of home campaign in central London? I think that's a good place to look. I think we'll also see more location or audience modeling based on client first-party data. So lookalike modeling is a hugely valuable use of first-party data, and something like out of home. I mean, you don't get to do that level of impact on an audience like that anywhere else. So that's one of the big use cases, I think, for the channel in general, which I'd probably like to see some more of.
And there's more advertisers and agencies now who are using location as that real connecting glue. Looking from how they build audience insights, how they're building, and then sort of taking building those audience, segmenting and building audiences using location, and then because it's built through location, the way that you can implement it into out of home, connected audio, CTV is much, much more seamless. So I think using that sort of location as the new cookie, if you like, will be another big trend that we'll see for the next 12 months.
Not just in out of home, we're seeing
No,
it.
not out of home, yeah, exactly.
We're seeing it already now, the whole sort of concept of geo-indexing and using the postcode sector as like
hexes and all of that, yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That's the end of the formal panel session. And we have a lot of questions. There's about 15 on here. I'm not sure we're going to get through them all, but we'll certainly try our best. If you're all right to stay and take something that you're not necessarily prepared for. So we'll see if we can do our best. But the first one from Alex, and I have to say thank you to Alex Greaves. I know you're here in the audience, but thank you, because he was also one of the people that we interviewed in our report. So thank you very much, Alex. He wants to know, how do we ensure that programmatic out-of-home increasing spend isn't just cannibalizing from existing out-of-home spend, and that its growth is truly incremental? I mean, I have the stat from the report, but Alice, you look like you've got something to say.
Well, I think you mentioned it earlier. You did mention it earlier. It's the fact that we want to see the spend coming in from other channels. So we want to see the digital teams getting upskilled to a point whereby out-of-home is the same way that mobile now is just part and parcel of every single sort of plan and activation. And I think if we can see the increase coming out of the digital teams, then that automatically means we're not going to be cannibalizing the spend.
Yeah, and we do have the stats in the report, as I said, to back that up, that if you are talking to the digital and programmatic teams, that is where the growth comes from. Andrew, from an agency perspective, does that change things in terms of how you structure and who has the responsibilities? I mean, obviously, you can only talk from your example.
It's a really, I mean, I think if I had the answer to that, I'd probably sell the solution and retire to the Bahamas. But I think it has to affect the structure. I mean, talking about commercial structures and agencies is unpopular, but it's not. The agencies are set up in specialist hubs that aren't set traditionally to cater for multidisciplines or cross-media knowledge. To answer the question about cannibalizing, I guess the answer is maybe, which is a really crap answer. But we would, and our team, we would view it as it's incremental digital investment, yes. Whether or not it's total increases in advertising investment, Who knows? Not an easy one. Good question, though.
Well, I would encourage you to read the report because we do have the stats to back that up. So,
you guys
I mean, just while we're talking about agency structure and programmatic sitting either within the out-of-home team or within the digital team, talk to us a little bit, Andrew, sorry, about how we address that education. And is it about putting these two sides, taking people who have a digital background and understand programmatic and putting them together with people who come from more of a traditional out-of-home background? Or, what is there an answer?
Yes. I mean, they should be working more closely together. I think there's a lot of pressure on programmatic teams to now have to understand, in the spirit of being an omni-channel planner, TV, the incremental nature of CTV as it applies to television. You've got digital audio, and you've got programmatic out of home. So it's quite a big ask for digital colleagues to be able to have fluent discussions about all of those things. So actually, what we have seen is a lot of people dealing direct with vendors and partners for their views, rightly, of what best practice looks like for their client and their campaigns.
There was also, I'm part of the IAB UK working group for digital out-of-home, as I'm sure a few other people in the room are as well. And there was a survey that actually went out to all of the agencies recently, and it hasn't actually been published yet, but at the last meeting, one of the comments that came back is what the clients and agencies want to actually see is actually a unified out-of-home approach. So get away from this budget sitting for static, budget sitting for digital, just going direct, and then programmatic digital out-of-home. I think it has a lot of synergies with what we're seeing in TV right now, whereby, especially in markets such as France, whereby like linear and CTV is actually being sort of bought and planned in a holistic fashion. And that was kind of like the overriding thing that came out of that survey, is that's what they would like to see. Whether that's possible or not, I think we're a long, long way off. But it was interesting, I thought.
And as I said earlier, I think as measurement approaches improve, there'll be a better understanding of the interoperability between channels. So, and I'm convinced that out-of-home will show this amplification effect for other channels. And as more brands see that, they'll probably want to bring it all closer together. I think across the agency groups as well, you're seeing more integration between the historic out-of-home teams being integrated in with more programmatic experts. And where that's not happening, where there are sort of standalone out-of-home teams, they're working hand in glove with the agency, the media agencies as well. So there's definitely tighter relationships between the out-of-home specialists and the day-to-day strategists and planners at the client level.
I'll put you on the spot here, Mark. Do you think there's still, and it's a question on here, it's not just me, right? I'm repeating the questions. Do you think there's still a place for the specialists in the UK?
Yeah, I think there's, absolutely. There's, out-of-home can be a complicated world, and out-of-home still has classic paper and paste as well as digital, as well as programmatic. So you've got different layers there. Within out-of-home as well, you have experiential, and you've got special builds, and you have loads of different areas where having a specialist expertise is definitely advantageous. So, but generally, I just think those teams and that expertise, and there needs to be a bit more osmosis between those guys and programmatic and digital and data teams as well, because data overlaps into everything now. So there's definitely sort of a role for out-of-home specialists. But bringing them closer to day-to-day planning, to data strategies, to audience strategies, that is happening, and it's accelerating in certain groups more than others. But yeah, there's definitely still a role for them.
Okay.
Completely agree.
Just switching topics onto the DCO topic, and more from a technical perspective, are there any security concerns around DCO HTML5 technology, and how do we overcome this? Anything you're hearing? Or not?
Oh, wow.
Maybe not.
That's a big question. I haven't heard of anything. No, I think it also depends what data it is that you're using. Because I think we have to bear in mind that a lot of the data when we talk about DCO within out-of-home is more sort of trigger-based things. It's bringing in things like sports scores. It's bringing in through weather. It's bringing through things that arguably is not PII. So I think that sort of security aspect is less of a concern. However, it's a very good point, and it's something I'm going to take away.
Feasibly, you could pull through live tweets,
Yeah.
and feasibly,
Yeah.
those live tweets could be incredibly horrible.
Yes.
So yeah, I think that I don't think a brand would take that risk of embarrassing themselves with having a political message or a hate message or anything like that coming up on one of their ads.
Interestingly, we actually did something. This was actually not when I was at Yahoo. I was at a company called Millennial Media at the time, and we actually took over the screens in Piccadilly Circus weirdly for Colgate, for a toothpaste thing. And for that point, we actually had to have an intermediary.
Yeah.
So all the tweets went through an intermediary, and there was actually a bunch of humans there that were actually, checking it. And there was like a 4-minute delay, basically. So if people were, the whole idea is people could stand there, tweet, and they'd see themselves up on screen. But there did have to be a delay.
I bet they saw
for
some
that
things
reason.
as well. I bet they saw some things.
Yeah.
Can I have that job the next time the opportunity comes up?
That moderation of social, because we did see that social media was the #1 channel actually to pair programmatic out of home. But as you say, I think that, as a brand, you'd have to make that decision of, okay, do we moderate this UGC, or do we, go full on in and take the risk? And I think
But there has to be technology.
even
now
with
to-
toothpaste, it could be offensive, right?
Maybe, potentially. But and that's an example from 10 years ago. So there has to be technology now that exists that almost does that sort of auto-moderation for brand safety.
If there was copy which was truly dynamic without a filter, we may not even accept it because we've got to protect our landlords first and foremost. So, and our landlords being, National Rail and Tesco and others. And yeah, if there's going to be anything which is controversial which comes up and we can kind of see that in the copy, that there's the potential for it, it may just be rejected before it even runs.
For sure. Thank you. Okay, last question, and I apologize we haven't been able to get through all 15, but just wanted to touch on measurement and within programmatic digital out of home. How do we get it properly considered within mixed media modeling?
You mean QR codes on stuff?
No.
Sorry.
Well, within MMM, did you say that?
Yes.
Yeah, so we've just done some research recently where the way that out of home has traditionally gone into econometric models has been by using 6 different factors. And our research now is showing that, as out of home has evolved and as it's gone more programmatic and as we've got more and more data around the frames, around the longitude and latitudes, there's probably 20 factors that really should go into MMM models. So our team and our insights team have been working really closely with the marketing science teams and the data science teams at some of the agency groups to show that when you put more granular data into the models, it's actually showing us a much higher impact for out of home. So I think there needs to be a revised view of, are your econometric models future-proofed? Are you using legacy models? If you are, it may be a time to relook at it. And then as econometric modeling has become more Bayesian in its approach, which is sort of taking real-time data feeds and trying to be more agile and trying to get to the point where you're not waiting months and months and months for an econometrics report to be published and then to look back at campaigns retrospectively. There's a big move towards more sort of agile MMM, so you can look at those in-flight optimizations. So yeah, a few factors there. Relook at your econometric models, and I think there'll be more innovation in trying to get to that more sort of agile MMM approach.
Are you publishing any of those insights for the first bit?
Yeah, we have. We've gone on tour with it. I think we partnered up with Talon on it.
Yeah.
So it came out maybe 3 months ago.
Okay.
But yeah, speak to me. But it's Chris Felton in our team who is our head of insights who can help point you in the direction there.
Great. Anything else to add? Otherwise, I'll say thank you so much to all of the panelists. Please give them a round of applause. And those, if you've noticed on your chairs, there's a little envelope. It's got a ripped pull. If you take a video, actually, while you're opening that up, and share it on socials in the most creative way possible, there is a little prize. So please feel free to submit that. Thank you, everybody, for coming along today. It's been fantastic. You braved the weather, you've braved the traffic, and delays. But it's been lovely to hear and have such exciting and stimulating conversation. Lots to think about, but the future is definitely bright. So thank you again. And we have the room until 11. 11. So there's teas and coffees and refreshments at the back if you'd like to stay and chat and network. The gallery itself also opens at 11. So if you are still here, please feel free to take a look around. There's some amazing screens at this venue. So just thank you again for coming and have a lovely rest of your day.